We're pleased to have here Vikas Gupta, who is the founder and CEO of Wonder Workshop and brain behind Dash and Dot robots. What they do, they teach kids 6 and up to code. Vikas was a pioneer in virtual currency. His company was acquired by Google. He's done a few other businesses, but then when his daughter was born, he realized that schools lack science and technology education, and he started working in this direction. And so now his boss are in more than 4,000 elementary schools, endorsed by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the company was a winner of the 2016 Design Award. Our moderator is Manu Kumar, founding partner at K9 Ventures. Welcome.
All right, thank you, Anna. So yes, as Anna mentioned, my name is Manu Kumar, and I'm the founder of K9 Ventures. We do pre-seed and seed investing here in the Bay Area. And some of the companies I've invested in include Lyft and Twilio, Lucidchart, eShares, Auth0, and Osmo. But today I'm here to talk with Vikas. And Vikas, as Anna mentioned, is the co-founder and CEO of Wonder Workshop. And Wonder Workshop makes toy robots. They're very cutely named Dash and Dot. And Dash and Dot encourage kids to learn how to program and code while having fun at the same time. Since we only have about 15 minutes here, I'm not going to get into details of their product, and I'd encourage you to actually check out Vikas's website at makewonder.com. And there you'll actually be able to see what the product actually looks like, and that'll give you a good sense of how cute these robots are. And so I'm going to start by just asking Vikas, like, what's your founding story? Like, how did you get here? What caused you to actually start Wonder Workshop? And just give us a little background on yourself and how you got here.
Yep,
yeah.
Thanks, Manu.
Yeah.
So we started the company in 2012. As Manu and Anna mentioned, I'm the founder and the CEO. Before this, I had no background in the education space or robotics. And I got on this path primarily because I was spending a lot of time with my daughter. Previously to this, I was running consumer payments at Google. And when my daughter was born, I decided to leave my job and actually spend more time with her. And the specific thing that captivated me was that we're putting very, very advanced devices, technology devices, or iPads and so on in the hands of our kids. And these are far more powerful than the devices we grew up with. And the question I was asking myself every day was, will this become as creative a tool for these kids to grow up with as the PCs were, or will they end up becoming more of a consumer with these devices around them? And eventually it led to asking myself, how will children learn to code on an iPad? And as I was starting to investigate more, what I found from research at places like MIT and Tufts was there are a lot of tools for the kids middle school and older. The gap exists in the elementary schools, and there is research which show that kids can learn effectively the programming concepts as young as 5 or 6 years old. What they need is the right tool. And to me, that pointed out both a possible impact I could have with the work I do, and two, a possible market opportunity where if you could actually build the right tool for elementary school kids, there are 25 million kids in the US that we could service. And that became the right starting point for what became now Wonder Workshop.
So I think you spent some time at Amazon where you're working on payments.
Yep.
And then after Amazon, you actually started a company, Jambool, which was acquired by Google.
Yep.
Then you were working on payments at Google after that. And then you left Google in 2012
Yep.
To start Wonder Workshop. And so how many people in your company right now? Just give us some stage idea of like what stage are you at? So
we are 50 people in our company. In terms of funding, we've raised 2 rounds of financing. As a business, we've grown 3 to 4x year over year. And the thing that we're really proud of is we've now shipped more than 300,000 robots to customers around the world. We not only ship these robots to customers, we also help them find success. We host a robotics competition once a year, where last year's competition brought 20,000 children from 52 different countries to compete And the other thing we do is these competitions have equal number of boys and girls participating, and those are things that we're very proud of. So that's kind of where we are. They're used in more than 12,000 elementary schools all over the world, more than 9,000 of them in the US. And it's starting to grow at a very rapid pace now as computer science has picked up momentum in so many different parts of the world.
So you're not a normal company. You're a very unusual type of company, right? Like when I think about your company, you're a hardware company, you're a robotics company, you're a toy company, you're an education company, you're an entertainment company, right? So that's not the usual Silicon Valley sauce. So tell us about like just what's been the journey to kind of get here, both in terms of fundraising, in terms of recruiting. Just like, what are the differences you've seen?
I think in some way this has been, I would say, the 4 years of enormous amount of learning for me. Because you mentioned I was doing nothing related to robotics or education before this. I was a payments guy, so to say. And as you also mentioned, it's not a typical, you don't see companies like us in Silicon Valley where we're building robotics, robots, we're building it for children. Very few companies do you find in Silicon Valley building products for kids. It's hardware that we're shipping to retail, consumer retail, that's again very much of a rarity. And on top of that, we're also building distribution channel to schools and growing that part of the market. So doing all of them together then becomes a very, very anomalous as a company. And the challenges we've seen, I think, is that when we look and talk to companies or talk to other people, there are very few kind of other companies or people that we can learn from directly. And so a lot of learning we've had to do kind of on the job, if you will. For example, distributing into schools is, most people shy away from it because those sales cycles tend to be very long. And the only company that has succeeded in it at the groundswell are either very large companies like Scholastic and others, or people at very small scale. So for us to kind of go from non-existent to very large, there weren't a lot of stories for us to follow and figure out. So we trusted intuition in many ways. Working with customers a lot more closely has been a key part of our success. And lastly, I think trying to figure out the whole notion of growing a consumer hardware business where you have very high seasonality, especially in a toy business, it's even more extreme. So kind of handling that has a huge impact on how we handle cash and forecasting and so on. So that's been also a huge part of the growing up that we've had to do over the last few years.
I've seen some of the companies in my portfolio which have a consumer hardware product where almost like 60% of their revenue might come in Q4.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very high seasonality indeed. You also mentioned hardware, and I've invested in a lot of hardware companies and seen a lot of horror stories in hardware companies. Do you have any interesting horror stories on hardware that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots and lots. I think we've now are in a third year of third Christmas that we would be getting into this year. And the one horror story probably that comes to mind is one from last year in the middle of the year, July or June. We had made no changes to our robots. The same hardware was shipping to customers. But all of a sudden, we were seeing reports of very large number of failures in the market, which is people will buy the robots, they'll turn them on, and very soon after that, the robots will stop working. And we couldn't figure out why. So one of the first things was we had to stop production immediately. We had to bring all the robots back from the market, from our retailers. We had shipped them out to a bunch of retail stores, to Amazon, people buying from our website. So we had to bring them all back. And then we had to very quickly figure out how to diagnose it. And turns out the issue was in a piece of software we had written 2 years before then, which somehow hadn't activated this bug on the robots until then. And when it did, we were already at a much larger scale than we were 2 years before. So handling that at scale became a very big issue. I would say full credit to the team. We could solve the problem and get back on our feet within a matter of 2 weeks. But we also knew getting into it that if we don't solve it quickly enough, this could easily mean the death knell in the company.
Now, you mentioned retail. You have products that are going into retail. So that makes me think about just figuring out all the channels that you have to use, right? So you've mentioned getting into schools. You've mentioned going into retail. So tell us about just kind of like, how did you even get into retail? What was your first retail channel? How did you get there, and what was that like?
Yeah, our first retail channel was online. I would say our website, and continues to be our biggest channel, partly because coming from payments and e-commerce and Amazon, knowing where the world is headed, we always wanted that to be a key part of a channel. But putting that aside, Amazon was the first one we went online with, went live with. And then before going into any retail channel, we wanted to be live with Apple stores, largely because we felt that would be the right brand association to put out step of the door, and that would influence other retailers. So which is what actually happened. And that one was more, I would say, fortuitous, because as it happens, one of the schools the robot's being used in, the kids who were using it, their dad ran the PR, or was a part of the PR organization at Apple, and next day we were at Apple pitching because they loved the robots. So that's how Apple happened, I would say, serendipitously. And then following that, we got in touch with retailers at different trade shows and some through manufacturer rep firms, and over time built relationships. We are now in Toys R Us, Target, Barnes & Noble, and they're all kind of scaling and growing, but as we all know, retail's seeing a big shift, continues to, where Amazon outperforms just about everyone. And on the school side, for the longest time, we weren't focused on trying to sell top-down into schools through channel. We were more focused on how can we help every teacher find success. So for the first year and a half, most of the people buying our robots were teachers buying directly, which is buying from 1 robot to 5 robots for their classrooms. And eventually, as they found more success, the word spread from them to districts and superintendents, and more districts and schools started buying the robots. And now we see sales happen across the board, and we have pretty large distributors that we work with who have resellers in every single state that we sell through, catalogs and so on. And then we also have enough of a purchase order handling process that schools can actually place orders directly with us, which happens to be the largest part of our school business.
I mean, so that's the two interesting things that you mentioned. Like first, that you're able to get traction in schools from teachers, and that's a very interesting nugget to me. That the teachers are the ones who are taking the initiative in order to bring the right technology into the classrooms, and then the districts and the superintendents and all that stuff kind of follow. So that's an interesting observation for me, and also that I think you mentioned to me before that once your product gets into schools, then it ends up getting additional traction in the consumer space with parents after that. So could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So what we see when we do post-purchase surveys with customers, we find that 20 to 30% of customers report that they bought the robots because the children were using them in the classrooms, and that's where they observed it. And to us, this has worked as a really good virtuous cycle, where as we market to teachers and have them adopt the product, the value of the robot sells itself to the parents who then want to go on and find purchase. So our focus always has been enabling our customers to be successful on a platform, whether it's teachers or children or parents. And that really helps drive this word of mouth. One of the other things with the robots is we knew from very early days that as much as we can sell the robots by putting it on a shelf, it doesn't sell as well as if you actually experience a robot. And that's one of the big differentiators, which is if you have user robots in a school environment, you see the full value of where it can take you. And that becomes a very key selling point to anyone who's experienced it.
And talking about experiences, like what's kind of the most fun or unique experience that you've seen and been surprised by, like of how kids have been using Dash and Dot?
Yeah, there are lots and lots, and I think there are two nuggets maybe I can point. One very small instance where it happened in our office, so our robots can be programmed to very easily by children 7 or 8 years old. So the robots can be programmed by a child to follow a voice. So as you speak, the robot will follow you around. So we had 2 different children testing with the robots in their office. One child had programmed it to play random sounds and move around in a random motion. And the other child had programmed it to follow the voice. So as it happened, the 2 robots came close to each other, and one robot started following the other robot around all over the office. And just seeing that laughter and joy with these 2 kids serendipitously discover that was phenomenal. And the other one, I think that we're very proud to kind of see this happen. There's a community in Ohio, a small town, rural town, total population of 900, where that entire community got together to fund enough robots so that every single child in that town in elementary schools is on a robotics competition. And the reason they do this is because they see that this is what helps their children grow up to have the kind of jobs that they probably won't have today.
Sounds good, Vikas. I think we're going to be out of town very soon, but I'm sure if anybody has questions, we can take them offline, but I want to make sure that we keep things on schedule for Anna and Stas as well. All right? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manu. Thank you, Vikas.